We really aren't doing the kingdom
Correct.
any favors by telling people they're leaders when they're not and telling other people they aren't leaders when they are.
We're all called to be disciples of Jesus first and foremost. And so as we grow and mature in our faith, then we get to go back and help invest in other people.
Young women really don't ever know how to grow into their leadership potential unless someone affirms leadership in them before the age of 19.
The things that we're feeling in that moment do not have to necessarily be portrayed. That's part of being the professional. Hello and welcome to the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. My name's Eric and I'm the host for today's conversation. I have with me one of my favorite guests. I'm just going to be honest and play favorites. Kadi Cole. Kadi's with us.
Thanks, you friend. Thank you.
Kadi, it's so good to see you. It's so good to get to be together. We're in person.
I know we work virtually together a lot, but it's fun to be in real life and really fun to sit and just have some time to chat about things.
I know. I live in Ohio where the sun never shines, and you live in the Sunshine State.
That's right, South Florida, so it's very different.
I'm jealous. But it's summertime, and we're in the middle of nowhere, Indiana.
That's right. Momentum Youth Conference. It's the place to be. Best week of the summer. We love it.
Yes. She's got it. If you had said hashtag best week of summer,
Then I really would have nailed
I
it.
would have wondered if you were okay. Yeah. So this is a big deal for Momentum Ministry Partners, and Kadi, you're here representing Momentum Marketplace. And not only if you're watching on the video, Kadi's repping Momentum Marketplace.
That's right. I got this on. That's one of the programs that I helped create here. And so
tell us about it.
Oh, sure. Well, I love it. This is a discipleship program. We have 3 versions, but we're here really talking about our high school version that churches can offer for students that is basically kind of like a career discipleship program. A lot of kids can feel a lot of openness and a lot of invitation to pursue ministry full-time vocationally, but that's like only 10% of kids. 90% of kids are probably going to have a career in the marketplace. And they also have a calling that as local churches we need to steward. And there are mentors in our church pews that have great insight and great doors they can open for them. And so our goal is to connect those mentors with these students and help have examples and opportunities that they wouldn't get otherwise. And then we also have a young adult version for kids out of high school. And then also we just released a Spanish version for all of our Spanish speaking congregations. And so we're really excited about all of it.
Unbelievable. The marketplace curriculum and that whole idea and concept has helped me even frame how I communicate. So yesterday morning, we're at Momentum Youth Conference. I got to teach a power track, and we're talking about like the path to ministry and spiritual growth and discipleship. And so there's a whole bunch of students in the room. And guess how I started the power track?
How?
There's primary calling and secondary calling. And I walked them through that. And Kadi, it was awesome because I saw students like it clicked. They got it. And I learned that from you and from Momentum Marketplace. So for our listeners, kind of explain that.
Sure.
What's the primary, secondary calling? How do you define that, describe it?
Calling in the Bible can be very confusing and it can feel kind of overwhelming. It can also feel like it's this big thing that you never achieve. Or if you're in full-time ministry or not, you kind of feel like pastors have a calling, but the rest of us don't.
Yeah.
But really, when you kind of boil down the New Testament, there's what we call a primary calling, which is all of our calling to follow Jesus. We all have this primary calling. And really, 80 to 90% of our decisions in life can get figured out with that. Should I steal something? Well, no. Should I, lie on my resume? No. Like, there are a lot of decisions that get figured out by just being Christ-like, obeying God's word. But then that 10 to 20% that God sort of gives us freedom to make our own choices, or at least be unique to us. So who am I going to marry? What city am I going to live in? What am I going to major in? Do I take this job or that job? Do I take time off from work? Do I work when I have kids? Like, all of those decisions, there aren't black and white answers. And so that's where we really have the Holy Spirit, and we each get to kind of follow our own path, and all of them are legit. All of them are God ordained. All of them are actually holy callings, and all of them actually are ministry.
Yes.
Every member of the body of Christ is also a minister. So we really try to help students because our culture likes to make that secondary calling. Where am I going to live? What career will I have? How much money am I going to have? What's the legacy I'm going to leave behind? We try to make that primary. We try to make that 80 to 90% of the pressure and the decisions and what we try to achieve. And really, Jesus becomes like 10 or 20%. And we want to right size that. Say, actually, if you follow Jesus, he's going to bring you the opportunities. You don't even need to know what you're going to do when you're 45, when you're 18. My career, I've had several different detours and twists and turns. I love the trajectory God has taken me on, but there's no way I could have ever imagined.
Right.
I mean, me doing this right here didn't even exist when I was in college. How would I ever have been able to choose it? And so it really gives us a chance to kind of take a lot of pressure. One of the things I hear from students that they appreciate about Momentum Marketplace is it takes the pressure off from needing to know all of my life's plan when I'm 18 or 19 years old. And so just it's walking day by day with the Lord, saying yes to the things in front of you, trusting that he's got the right trajectory and pathway for you. And if I just live according to Jesus's rules, I really can have a great, wonderful, effective, and impactful life.
Yes. So one of the things that I love in this process is how this pairs with local churches, because even the free giveaway on the Marketplace website, momentummarketplace.org, thank you, is the free giveaway is a 4-week series that youth pastors can use to help introduce this very concept to their students and help them understand that the difference of your calling, and that there's not a lesser than Christian, but that was kind of hardwired into my power track yesterday of like, we're all called to be disciples of Jesus first and foremost. And so as we grow and mature in our faith, then we get to go back and help invest in other people. And so like for the adults that are in the room, I'm like, you get to mentor. It doesn't really matter if you're a youth pastor that's paid by the church, or if you're a volunteer. You get to come alongside these students. We're called by Jesus to do the Great Commission, go and make disciples. So I love the language. You're defining terms. You're helping things like lock into place and make sense in all of that, which is a big, big deal. So Kadi, with beyond that 4-week series, if somebody is interested in using Momentum Marketplace in their church, how do they get connected? What would next steps be?
Tons of easy ways to find us. So momentummarketplace.org is really the best place. We got lots of information. Like you said, we're trying to be very local church-based. Most programs out there are trying to build a big network of people for themselves. We really want students to be engaged deeper in their local church with their own local mentors. And so it's an equipping kind of place. So you can go to momentummarketplace.org. There is that curriculum. You can get more information. You can email us. You can go off the main Momentum Marketplace or Build Momentum website. So just reach out to us. Let us know you're interested. We'd love to follow up and help figure out what program would be the best fit and how to help you launch that.
Amazing. What we'll do, we'll link to those in the show notes as well. So if you're listening, you can check the link. It'll be there. The other thing, Kadi, because we're at Momentum Youth Conference, your new project, the Together Project, your podcast, is awesome. I've been a huge fan. I'm listening along the way. I love what you just did with Dave Ferguson. But the fun thing about you in your navigating this idea of together, and when we look local churches, when we think about student ministry, we're at Momentum Youth Conference, right? I'm seeing a lot of churches right now that are hiring a male and female staff role within their student ministry. And so I think, if we're honest, a lot of times, having been a youth pastor myself for a long time, I didn't really know, especially as a single youth pastor who was starting out, how in the world do I invest in the female students in my youth ministry? And vice versa, if you're a female youth director, youth pastor, and you're investing in the students in your youth group, how do you connect with the boys who want to make inappropriate jokes and talk about whatever? And so if you're willing, let's go there and kind of talk about this today. And hopefully this will be a helpful resource for our audience.
Well, just a little background. So I've served in full-time ministry for almost 30 years now. Before that, I served in ministry as a volunteer since I was like in middle school. So local church and being a part of local church has really been a part of me, even as I worked in and outside of the marketplace. But the last few years, because I rose in leadership at my local church, so I served on the executive team for a long time. I launched a lot of campuses. I do speak and consult at a lot of churches now. And of course, my work with Momentum. One of the big challenges we found in leadership development pipelines and just in ministry effectiveness overall is that men and women, particularly in church spaces, because we are so careful, which I want us to be, because we're so careful about gender boundaries, because we're so careful about violating those things. We've got a lot of rules. And most of our rules kind of segment people into women can work with women and men can work with men. So in our mindset, we sort of land that way. I would just challenge most church leaders, that really isn't a bubble of protection anymore. Just because women mentor women and men mentor men doesn't mean it's above reproach, doesn't mean there isn't risk for sexual inappropriate behavior, doesn't mean there isn't accusation that could come up. And so because we've fallen into kind of those gender buckets, that does sort of go into our thinking a little bit. And so what I try to advocate for is a little bit more of a higher level way of thinking about it, where we do more integration. That's why my podcast is called the Together Project. It's really not about separating and segmenting. It's really about coming together and learning from each other, keeping those professional guardrails, keeping everybody safe, but being able to cross over, because what we found, really, we see this in families, we see this in school systems, and we see it in churches, is that young people who are developing need both male and female voices. It would be like if you had, you and your wife have a son and a daughter. It would be like you saying, I got the boy. Hey, babe, you take the girl, and we'll see you in 15 years. Your kids aren't going to get everything they need. They need both parents. They need both voices. They need to be able to have personalities show up in both genders. They need to be able to see both genders be strong. They need to be disciplined by both genders. They need to have fun with both genders. Like, we need people to be whole people, not gender stereotypes and segmented. And so as we think about ministry, particularly in this culture where there is a lot of confusion about gender, it actually becomes more important that we're solid in who we are and know how to interact with each other in really godly, healthy, safe ways. That's what's missing. Not the safety of segregation, but the safety of healthy relationships and good boundaries. Teenagers are not great at that, just developmentally. And so as adults, we have to be extra good at setting those boundaries and holding to them. We also find that leaders tend to get mentored by people of the same gender. And so you might say, hey, the way I'm going to deal with having young women in my youth group is I'm going to hire or recruit a woman to do girls' discipleship, and I'll do boys' discipleship. And again, that's helpful. That's better than no discipleship, but it's not really everything a student needs to have a really well-rounded spirituality and view of what personality and gender looks like. And then as we move forward, we end up with men and women who don't know how to navigate together. And so they go into the marketplace where they are working together, where they are interacting together. You're in church pews where your families are interacting together. And we haven't trained them how to be together. They haven't learned how to be brothers and sisters. They've only learned how to be in separate pockets. And so we have a long way to go to create really safe, healthy, godly environments, but we can start in our student ministries by training, by modeling, by encouraging. I mean, even at a place like Momentum Youth Conference, you see boys and girls hanging out with each other all the time. We actually want to encourage that, but we want to encourage safe, appropriate behavior as they do it.
Yep. For sure. Katie, you said a lot of really good things there, and I don't even know where to go from here. But I want to go backwards a little bit, because I think sometimes in our buckets of being gender and segregated and some of that has been the safeguards, that has been the protective, that has been those things, we're inadvertently communicating something that we probably don't actually mean. So what would some of those subtle ways that churches, student ministries are unintentionally leaning too heavy to one side or the other that you've seen, whether it's programming, language, leadership style? Like, what would some of those examples be? Maybe.
Well, one thing that I really encourage people, partly because my graduate work and expertise is in leadership development, that's my main career. So I'm very aware of how we talk about leadership to young leaders. And it's really easy. And I would even say I fell into this for a long time, which is it's easy for me to look at a young man and be like, you are going to be such a great leader one day. I remember being in church with my 5-year-old son. He's wearing a Superman cape, which he wore his entire 5-year-old year.
That's
and
awesome.
Just everyone would come up and be like, you are such a strong young man. You're such a great leader already. I love that you're showing up and wearing your costume. And he just got so much affirmation. And the word leader was used in his life just hundreds of times at 5 years old. And he's wearing a cape. Like, there's no leadership happening. He doesn't talk to anybody. He doesn't want to socialize. He's flying flying through the lobby. But that's how we looked at him because he's a guy. Now, most of my research when I have a book on this topic, and so most of my research shows that young women really don't ever know how to grow into their leadership potential unless someone affirms leadership in them before the age of 19. And the number of women who grow up in a church and no one ever uses the word leader around them, even when they're organizing all the youth group mission trips, even when they're running the greeter team, even when they're, out at Momentum Youth Conference, they got the microphone and, maybe pray on stage like we've seen so many great young women do.
Yeah.
We look at her and we say, great job.
Yes.
So neat to have you on stage. We really believe in women, but that's different than looking to her at 16 and saying, you are a really strong, godly leader.
Yeah.
Right. So she doesn't think of herself like a leader like my 5-year-old does. So that's one of the subtle things that all of us kind of run into, again, because most of us aren't thinking about it. We've just sort of been handed down this bias that men are leaders naturally and women aren't. And so then we raise up a generation that really aren't familiar with their skill set. And I obviously want to find women who have great leadership. Not every woman is supposed to be a leader, but I also work in a lot of churches where there are men who think they're leaders who aren't gifted like that. And so we really aren't doing the kingdom any favors by telling people they're leaders when they're not and telling other people they aren't leaders when they are. So the key for us is to really affirm the gifting and the abilities we see in people. And actually, when you're young, just call everybody a leader. Everyone's got leadership in them. Everyone's got potential. We just want to make sure that we're not siding on just guys or overdoing it in just girls.
Yeah.
Some other similar buckets that are easy to do is to say, in fact, I've heard it even here this week because I've done some sessions on mental health and balancing mental and emotional health with spiritual health. Yeah. And it's really easy for leaders, particularly to say, oh, those girls, they're all in their feelings. They're all so emotional. Well, I know a lot of girls who really aren't overly emotional. And I know a lot of young men who are completely overly emotional. And so it's really a false narrative that girls are emotional and boys aren't. And so, and again, it doesn't mean that they are not. It just means that we can't make that assumption. And when we use words, especially as leaders, and we say those things about people or about individuals or about a gender or an age or a, Gen Z are all lazy or they're lost, or whenever we make generalizations and stereotypes in general, we usually do more harm than good. So my encouragement is just to be really careful with our words. And if you want to affirm someone, take a little extra effort and affirm the real things you see. Don't feel pressure to say something that's not true, but try to avoid the generalizations that make someone assume something about themselves that's not true, that then they have to spend 5 or 10 or sometimes 20 years undoing in order to be fully who God created them to be in the kingdom.
Well, I think that's where the pressure comes from, because then if you get told that over and over and over again, you're a leader, you're a leader, you're a leader, and maybe God didn't even gift you with that.
Yes.
Or wire you that way. And so then it becomes the pressure.
Gender stereotypes are as harmful for men as they are for women. And we don't always recognize that. But there are a lot of men out there who feel guilty that they're not a big personality, who feel guilty that they need a lot of time to process their decisions, who feel guilty that they oftentimes don't know what to do, right? Those are kind of leadership qualities. And we look to our men and dads and fathers and we say, you're the leader of the home, which you are. But there's a lot of different ways to be the spiritual leader of the home. And that is very different than that Romans 12 or 1 Corinthians 12 gift of leadership. And I'm talking about that gift of leadership that we want to affirm in students accurately.
Yes, so good. So even in that, like defining what you mean by leadership, having influence or the impact that you can have and the decision-making process, like there's different levels within that of what that would look like and how that would play out in your life with the people around you.
Absolutely. I mean, motherhood is a humongous leadership role. Talk about influential and having authority and speaking into a young person and what that determines who they become. It's one of the most influential leadership roles in the world, but we almost never talk about motherhood as a leadership role.
Yep. That's so good. So good. Okay, Kadi, as we think about, like, a lot of times youth pastors, they're out of college, they're young. Traditionally speaking, I think they're usually single. And so maybe not always, but in that scenario, I was that person. I'm hearkening back to my days of being 21, a single male in a student ministry, and I don't know how to invest or even build trust or communicate with the girls in my student ministry. And yet, for all the things that you just said, I grew up in the church and in a very conservative evangelical church, but some of those stereotypes, the buckets were hardwired in me. There's protection and so it almost created a fear in me, if I'm being honest, of like, I don't know if I should talk to the girls. Are parents going to think this is weird? Or like, so I want to be above reproach was the phrase that I was like, how do you navigate that if you're talking to a young youth pastor, male or female, they're navigating this process? How do I connect and build trust or engage with the students of opposite gender in my student ministry? What advice would you give them?
So I just think it's important to remember this is not a situation unique to ministry. Teachers oftentimes run into this because they graduate at 21 and they turn around and become a high school student teacher, and there's only 3 years difference between the seniors in high school and you. And so I was a nurse. I saw it in nursing also because I'm graduating as a 21-year-old and I'm working in a hospital and I'm taking care of very personal things for men who are 45, right? So this is a very common thing in our culture to realize we have professional boundaries for a reason. We have ethics for a reason. We don't talk about those enough in ministry, and that's why it's easy for a young leader to feel lost or feel overwhelmed or feel pressure and fear. Fear is a good thing. It's actually really important for a young teacher to know not to flirt with a student. It is inappropriate to date someone in your youth group. Like, these things are true, but one of the kind of there's a lot we can go into about this, and I really recommend churches to have professional guidelines that every staff member and leader should be following. And it's one of the ways that we create safety. It's one of the ways that we protect ourselves against lawsuits. It's also one of the ways we get insurance in case there is a lawsuit. So all of these things have some left brain pieces to it. But the best rule of thumb is just to remember that you want to be consistent in your leadership. So what you do with one student, you want to be able to do with all the students. Now, this can be really hard for young youth pastors, I found, particularly because in their mind, somehow they've picked up along the way that what makes me a good youth pastor is if all the guys think I'm cool and they love hanging out with me. And that is okay, but think about a teacher or about a nurse. Those are actually really inappropriate ways of knowing if you're doing good at your job.
Right.
A pastoral job is a leadership job. A pastoral job has spiritual authority. And when there is a power dynamic, when there is authority of any kind, you can never be equal friends. It doesn't actually matter if people like you or not. Same with parenting. When you see parents and they're like, my goal is for my teenager to like me and for his friends to think I'm the super coolest mom ever, well, you've automatically just missed the point of parenting. And so anytime there's a power dynamic, we will get into trouble if we lose sight of it. So when you have power and authority of any kind, and when you're a youth pastor or a youth leader or a volunteer small group leader, whatever your role is, or just an adult around minors, you automatically have authority. You are the one responsible for holding all the boundaries, and it should be consistent. Again, because just because you go up and give a guy a hug doesn't necessarily mean you aren't sending a signal or he's feeling uncomfortable or there is a same-sex attraction that could be misconstrued in that. So you have to choose really careful behavior. And I like to encourage young leaders to think long-term about what are the habits and the behaviors about how you treat students, and not just students, but adults and coworkers. How do you treat people in a professional way? If you're in ministry particularly and you're hired, this is your professional career. What are the professional behaviors that I want to have through the course of my whole career, a 45-year career, that I can start practicing now so that I get muscle memory? They're built in. I don't have to change the way I say hi to someone when I move from student pastor to campus pastor, because we shouldn't do that. It's not new rules just because we're not hanging out with teenagers anymore. Who is the leader you want to be, and what are the behaviors you want to do? So some things that we need to look at: how do you express physical attention? So high fives, generally acceptable, not easily misconstrued. My pastor that I grew up with was a old, electrician in Montana, but he only ever touched anyone's elbow. Never gave hugs. If I tried to give him a hug, he would just give me a little elbow hug. Slightly awkward, but you know what? I never had a concern about anything my entire growing up in that church. He never had an accusation about him. He's like, nothing sexy about an elbow, right? So nothing can go wrong with that. So maybe it's a side hug. I think
Yep.
there's some pretty clear things that if you're not going to give full frontal hugs to someone. So you don't want to give that to a guy and you don't want to give it to a girl, because part of leadership habits of building a great leadership foundation is I am who I am with every single person. On the female leadership side, the reason women oftentimes get left out of leadership opportunities is not because they don't have leadership. It's not because they don't have calling. It's not even because there isn't a need. It's because men have built habits early on in their young years of how they interact with a leader, and they keep those into higher level leadership roles, and they aren't appropriate for women, and they don't know how to change them by the time they're 40. So women are just automatically out. And I just want to say, let's just make great habits now that will take you all the way to senior pastor. And no matter who God brings with whatever giftedness, you know how to have a comfortable conversation with them and mentor them in leadership and give them and challenge them and hold them accountable. You've built the habits that allow you to lead at every level that God calls you.
That is so, I want to clap.
You can. We are
is
online podcast.
so good, Katie. It's so good. Because what you're equipping us to understand is literally what Momentum Pro is built around.
That's right.
And so even with the student ministry leaders that we're working with that are in some of our cohorts, that you have been to our events and coached and equipped and helped them understand, is even outside of gender, like there's extra grace required people. There's people that you connect with. There's people that you don't. And there's people that you click and you just understand and you get it. But it doesn't mean in ministry you treat them differently, right? And so what you're saying applies in so many contexts and across so many levels. It's so helpful because the things that we're feeling in that moment do not have to necessarily be portrayed. That's part of being the professional.
That's right.
If you're nervous about giving a girl a hug, a side hug, I was known as the side hug. I got so nervous, and I was just like, there were youth group girls that literally would see me. They would tell me like, I don't have a dad. I see you as like my father figure. And I'm like, I'm not even old enough to be your dad. Like I'm 24 and you're 17. Like the math doesn't math, but they viewed me as that because they viewed me as, and I'm like, oh, so when I got that, I'm like, yes, I'm happy to give you a hug, but I'm like, side hug, or not all the way around, just part. Yep.
You don't have to equal, because you're the one in authority. What they express to you doesn't have to be reciprocated, and probably you shouldn't. But it doesn't mean they don't get to express. You don't get to express anything. Right. But if they feel really safe and comfortable with you and want to give you a side hug, and you do something else and hold her elbow, that's completely appropriate and gives her exactly the right message.
Yes. And then my nerves, that is the growing up in the culture that I did, I don't have to tell them that. I can just So that's exactly what you're saying. I think that you're helping unlock probably so many things for people, and I think this is tremendous. So Katie, you talked about I've heard you even say the future is better together.
Yeah, that's true.
So what does this well-balanced, what does that look like? Having both genders involved in children's ministry, student ministry within our churches, paint a picture of what that might look like.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of ways the future is together. I think gender is one of the easiest ones to take on because we have a majority of women in our churches. They're the backbone of our volunteerism. They tend to be the ones who decide to donate to our churches, and they're the ones who bring their children to church. And so when we unlock women in church, in fact, they're one of the largest growing populations leaving the church right now because we have not done a very good job. Yes. Wow. White collar educated women, one of the top next to young adults. And so when we don't do a good job making space, and I don't mean like they deserve to be something. I know very few women who are like trying to grab on for opportunity or being aggressive about authority. But what they want is something that has a good return for them. What they want is to be able to show up and be themselves and to serve in a way that they're gifted to, just like everybody else. So we also are experiencing the first generation of fully educated women and the first generation of women to survive the childbearing years and actually go into empty nest in health with education and time and money and availability to serve the kingdom like never before. And they are. Very few local churches are tapping into that and taking advantage of that. So we see a lot of women launching platforms. We see a ton of Christian women writing books and trying to start speaking, ministries and launching nonprofits. They've got so much capacity, and they have a desire to give back and a desire to take their leadership legs for a run, we are not really tapping into that. And so I really want to encourage churches and leaders to just think a little differently, especially if we grew up in spaces and places that had boxes for women, or where there were certain ministries you were allowed to do and certain that weren't. And for us as ministry leaders to make space on our team for any gift in whatever package it comes. So I try to encourage people, think less about the diversity of your team as like, I need someone old and someone young and someone black and someone white and someone in a wheelchair and someone male and someone female. Think more in terms of those gifts in the New Testament. How do I get all 13 gifts on my team? How do I make sure my team that I talk with, whether it's a leadership team or the executive team, give everybody whatever title you want, pay them, don't pay them, I don't care. How do I make sure I've got all the gifts at my disposal, that we're being a full, well-rounded New Testament ministry so that we're not leaving anything or anyone behind of who God has called to us?
I think that's called the body of Christ.
Well, it's a hard one for us to get our mind around as leaders. And so like one of the easiest ways is just if you have a project or you have a hole in your ministry or you have a need or something you want to start, think of a woman who is in her 50s or 60s that has capacity or had some sort of career or has a lot of availability, and just ask her if she'll come and help you start this thing or run this thing or manage this thing. And just see how it goes.
Or think it through. Bounce the idea off them.
Yeah.
They're going to have a different perspective.
I would put them to work.
Fair.
And so I would give them responsibility and I would test out their capacity and I would see if you've got some talent there and how you can actually use that on your team and use it in your ministry. And when we start putting more women into our teams and into our leadership and we start bouncing ideas off of them and they're coming to our retreats and they're coming and leading groups like this, then we build more diversity and we have more examples of both men and women leading. Students get more voices, more diversity. They see their gifts in the leadership they have. A lot of times students grow up and they only see leaders with a couple different gifts because our tendency is to recruit people like ourselves because they get it and they just read our mind and they do things exactly the way we would want. And that really is not the way you raise kids. And it's not really the way you raise students to become full-fledged, fully devoted followers of Christ. You want to almost be able to have every gift possible in your students available to them in real life example so that they've got someone to follow in their footsteps.
All right. So follow that thought. How do you see that in them and call that out? When you see a God-given, authentic gift that they have
in a student,
in a student, regardless of gender, how do youth pastors? Because kids are figuring that out now. They're like, I just learned that I can pray out loud. I just learned that as we've been having students do here, we're interviewing them, we're asking them a couple questions, but we're giving them a vision for what it might look like to have influence around others. And so, even in that way, for it to feel authentic and genuine and helping them have a confidence in their ability to lead or to influence, how do you, as a ministry leader, invest in that and pull those things out of them?
Well, there's two kind of things to keep in mind when you're working with teenagers. One is that personality and giftedness is not really fully formed till your early to mid 20s. And so by design, developmentally, teenagers are trying on different identities. They're trying on different personalities. They're trying in different classes, and they're trying on different spiritual gifts. So you want to give every kid a chance to try lots of different modalities. So you do want to take kids out and do evangelism, but you don't want to make a kid who hates it have to do it every single summer for his entire high school career because you love evangelism. You want that to be one of the things you do. You want to be able to have acts of service. You want to be able to have prayer meetings. You want to be able to have people who are teaching. You want to have gifts of mercy. You want to get ways that you serve people. You want to, again, all 13 gifts, you want to give outlets for all of those and see what kids are attracted to or what lights them up or what becomes fruitful. So that would be the first thing, is to not make assumptions on kids because of who their parents were or because they've been in a church that's been very missional. So it seems like they're really on mission when really that's just the culture they were brought up in. Part of our job is to make sure we help kids experiment with all the ways God maybe has gifted them. And then the second thing is, there is probably going to be fruit of developing gifts. And so if you have a kid who keeps inviting their friends to youth group and that you don't really have to explain that to them, they naturally do that.
Yeah.
I would probably suspect they've got an evangelistic gift, and I'd be talking to them about some podcasts and challenging them of what are they going to do with those kids next. I'd be nurturing that one gift where I'm naturally seeing fruit, but I'm also trying to make sure I don't put them into like a lane that labels them where they are limited in all the gifts that God has given them. So that would be the two things. Where am I naturally seeing fruit? How can I kind of gently nurture that to see if it sticks? But then how do I also make sure I give really well-rounded experiences in the full diet of my ministry year so that every kid gets a chance to exercise every gift? All of the gifts, by the way, are, they're supernaturally gifted to us. We tend to have some that were more prominent gifts than others. As you grow, you tend to add gifts as you mature in Christ. But all of the gifts are also commands. So hospitality is a gift, and then we are also all supposed to be hospitable. Evangelism is a gift, and we all are supposed to share our faith and evangelize. So giving everybody some exercise in all those gifts prepares them for that first primary calling of just being a disciple that lives all of those out. Yeah. And then we nurture those things with supernatural fruit as possible giftedness that they can be nurtured and mentored in extra.
So good. Kadi, you are a wealth of knowledge, my friend. What other resources for somebody who's like the light bulbs are clicking for them and they're like starting to see these things, maybe for some that they're like, oh my word, I was unaware. Yeah. Where can they go? What could they do? What other steps could they take to kind of learn a little bit more about this? I know that I'm going to promote go listen to some of Kadi's podcast episodes. Trust me, there's one specifically, I forget who your guest was, but it was episode 1 or 2 of this current season. And you did a phenomenal job of walking through. I learned so much from it, of walking through how to navigate and take next steps in this process. So other than your podcast, what are other resources that might be available?
Sure. So the resources I have, so on my website, kadicole.com, spelled Kadicole. I have a book that I've written specifically on this topic of gender, because it does sort of open up the options. Because again, once our leaders build habits that work for both genders, it also works for all races, all ages. And this is just the easiest thing to practice with. And it's a really big need. So my book is Developing Female Leaders. And then my podcast is called The Together Project. You can find that on any of the platforms.
Nice. Thank you. Kadi, you also have one other book, The Finding Your Leadership Voice.
I have a couple other books. Yeah, Finding Your Leadership Voice, particularly for women. So Developing Female Leaders, I wrote specifically for male leaders about how to expand, and actually my own leadership, because I was very biased against women for a long time, how to expand our own leadership habits to make space for women. And then if you are a female leader, Finding Your Leadership Voice is written specifically for you about how you can find your godly leadership voice without overstepping or being aggressive or arrogant or prideful. We all really worry about that, but we still have something to say. And how do you know when to say it and when to not?
Yep. That's where my brain was going. So good, Kadi. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for engaging in what may for some be a tough topic. So thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you, friend. Thanks for having me. It's always fun.
Good. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Momentum Ministry Partners Podcast. If you found this episode helpful, would you subscribe, rate, and leave us a review? That helps more people discover this podcast. We'd also love for you to share this episode with someone in your network who could benefit from the conversation. Because we want to be your go-to and most trusted resource, we'd love to hear from you. If you have a question or a topic you'd like us to cover in a future episode, send us an email to info@buildmomentum.org. Or you can send us a DM on any of our social media platforms. And if you want to learn more about Momentum Youth Conference, Urban Centers, Grace College Akron, Momentum Marketplace, or Momentum Pro, head over to buildmomentum.org. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.